David Smoak and 365 Sports. So I saw the Joel Klatt interview. He had been Tony Petitti, even as you mentioned. A lot of people had wondered about where has he been with Sankey taking most of the bullets and shrapnel. But he came out and he talked and he discussed the automatic qualifiers and so much more. Let me ask you this first of all, and then we get into that. Do you feel like Petitti and some of the reluctance with the Big Ten and the SEC to move forward, and they will, could it be that Petitti, I've been told that Petitti may have promised the ADs inside the Big Ten quite a bit, and he's not so sure he can deliver. Is that anything to do with today?
I don't think so. No, I think this is, Tony Petitti is never going to make promises, first and foremost, okay? He's not built that way. That's not his construct. He's an idea man, yes, and he's very innovative. But the reason why he's not been as accessible as Greg Sankey is because he has always been, from a management standpoint, a guy that gets it done behind the curtains. And when you're a television executive, David, that's how you have to conduct business. You're usually in the business of trying to win rights against competition from other networks, or you're trying to come up with ideas while working at networks, which is what he did as a programmer at both ABC and then in management. An executive producer at CBS, and prior to that, he was actually the general manager of WCBS as part of his resume moving up to this position to be the commissioner of the Big Ten. So I don't know. Listen, I would never say that promises were made with him. He just is an idea guy that believes that he can get ideas sold, as he did the Bowl Championship Series idea when he was a very young programming executive at ABC. And at that time, Roy Kramer was the most powerful man in college football, not named Jim Delaney. And that's how the BCS was actually put together. That was his idea. Now, you might say, Brando, you loathe the BCS. And I did, because I thought it was championed and formatted and promoted as a playoff when in fact it wasn't. I'll never forget seeing the promos on ABC where they would say 4 bowls, 1 champion. Mm-hmm. It was like, wait a minute, hang on a second. Well, that wasn't his idea. That was just somebody in their promotional staff that decided to do that. When I went to work at CBS, I wasn't working for Tony initially, but he came in about halfway through my 18 years there, and I worked for him for 9 years, or with him for 9 years. He'd probably say with him more than 4, because that's the kind of guy Tony Petitti is. But listen, I wanted to believe that I had won his favor, but I knew, and I always had to remind him of this, look, I know that I know that you were the founding father, along with Roy Kramer, of the BCS. And yeah, I think it's wrong because we need more teams competing, but it was more the case of the way it was promoted that bothered me. I certainly didn't want to think that a guy that could control what games I was going to get thought that I didn't like his idea of the BCS. It was a great step. Getting the Big Ten and the SEC and ACC together, where one could play a 2 if the 2 teams, that was a big deal in the 90s. I mean, Yep. It was. So he initiated that, and I think that he sees this from a commissioner's point of view as an opportunity to really make the college football season, the regular season, even better with better games, and to allow spots to be earned rather than be invitations, which is the context, I thought, of his interview with Joel. If you really looked at it, you looked at it closely, that was really the theme of the discussion. So I have been quick to say that while the media has taken a lot of shots at Tony of late, that they don't understand the way he manages. His management style is far different from Greg Sankey. Greg Sankey is a really an NCAA bureaucrat turned administrator. He came up through the NCAA system, the infractions committee. He was he played an integral role in the infractions area of the NCAA as he was coming up the ladder. And then he became the commissioner of the Southland Conference after spending time as that in that position, working through and with the NCAA, and managed to get with Mike Slive, and he's been very effective in his approach and what he's done post Mike Slive. But Commissioner Slive had him set up, and one of the reasons that Greg was hired was to clean up the Southeastern Conference, who had, I think, all but 2 schools on probation when Mike Slive took over as commissioner of the SEC. You know, again, people tend to forget where we were 20, 25, 30 years ago, but that's where we were. And Greg did a marvelous job of doing that. I think he's got the same sort of visionary skills of a Tony Petitti, but he certainly does not govern in the same manner that Petitti does. So, you know, that's been my case in point for the last few weeks and months about what was going on with all of this. And frankly, it was one of the reasons why I felt that even when we were talking about 12 and some were throwing out 14, I really felt we'd get to 16. And part of that was because of my not knowledge of or conversations with Tony Petitti. I just know how that guy thinks, and the notion that we can keep more competitive games or games that have more at stake on television is exactly what college football has always needed. And in my years of being around him, it was something that was mentioned often. We talked about quite a bit. In our MP rooms at CBS when Mike Oresco was in charge of programming and Tony was our executive producer, discussions like that, just basic overall discussions like that took place many, many times in our workplace. So I came away, I don't know about you, I'd love to get your opinion on it. I thought that anyone that was up in the air or thought, oh my God, this is terrible, if you hear the explanation, if you just listen to that one-on-one conversation that Joel had, I think that you can see with respect to what his thought process is, his vision is a good one. And frankly, I think that it will enhance if we go to 16, regardless of whether the format is 5-11 or 4-2, 4-2, 1-3, whatever it is. I still think it's going to be a hell of a lot better than it currently is.
Here's what I thought, and glad why we could have you on today. That's great. In between all your granddad duties, by the way, I know that you have been, and I mentioned to you yesterday, I don't want to get off track, but I mentioned yesterday that our daughter Jennifer is going to have a baby, hopefully sometime in mid to late October. So I'm gonna lean on you, not just for college football history, but also for tips on handling the schedule. So when Sankey says 4, people think he's being greedy and arrogant.
Yeah.
When Petitti says 4, I'm not sure that that's the same tone, but it's the same thought.
Yeah. Well, again, Greg has the sound of a commissioner speaking from the pulpit of someone that maybe came up through the bureaucracy of the NCAA, and as a commissioner who's been addressing large masses of people for a long period of time. That's, you know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. I mean, there's not. But part of, I think, what happened with Greg Sankey, and there have been times when I've been on the opposite side of maybe a quote of his, is because there are times when he can almost sound authoritarian when he's speaking. When Tony speaks, and it's not often. Okay, it's not often. And if you noticed, he chose very carefully a controlled environment with Joel, who certainly has opinions, but is with the company that has the rights, the primary rights over to the Big Ten. So he's going to face some fire, but it's friendly fire. So but he's got a softer and more explanation based thought process that he's able to get out there. It's not like somebody is asking a question of him that might put him on the defensive, which is invited whenever you're at a press conference, as Greg Snakey was at his meetings, and he came out, talking about 5'11", which from, many sources, and I think Joel indicated this in the interview, the 5'11" thing really surprised a number of people in the Big Ten, and maybe even surprised Petitti when it was brought up. They may have thought they had an agreement. I don't know. I've not talked with either one, but that's the way the story has played out. But the reality is, David, when the question came from Andy Staples about good of the game at Destin, sharply, the retort was, I don't need anyone to lecture me on the good of the game. That put him in an adversarial tone with, I think a pretty damn good reporter who I know was not trying to back him into a corner when he stated that as part of his question. And Tony doesn't ever want to be in that position. That's why he doesn't do as many interviews en masse, doesn't hold as many press conferences. That's just not who he is. So it's just a different approach to leadership is my point. But I think maybe the combination of the way Greg does it and the way that Tony does it are in sharp contrast, but maybe that's one of the reasons why they've established a pretty good relationship and why the two conferences are now working more together than they ever were in the past.
But there does seem to be the disagreement about whether the Big Ten wants to move forward with any kind of scheduling deal if the SEC doesn't go to 9 conference games. That's a sticking point. We know that's all about money.
Yeah.
Is ESPN?
Right.
So it's not as smooth. Oh man, these are the two big bullies. But bullies have their egos, and so it's kind of been all right. So what's the 4 automatic qualifiers? The Big Ten might be right now with the additions of Oregon, and I know Washington was down a little bit, and of course USC's trying to get their place back in it. But the Big Ten and the SEC, there is a lot of this. Well, let's look at what's happened over the last extra amount of years. Well, the Big Ten's won 2 straight national titles. I don't want a sport where you're getting awarded something for what is not that specific year. Do you?
Right. Nor do I. And I think that's part of the issue with 5 and 11. I absolutely agree with Commissioner Petitti that the less we have the committee responsible for, the better it is for the tournament per se and the teams that wind up in it. Okay. It's so subjective, and it almost seems that the committee, a little bit like the NCAA, it can have from time to time a knee-jerk reaction to whatever happened the year before. And I think we saw that in many, many ways. When Florida State had what happened to them, who was the beneficiary? It was Alabama. So in a similar situation this past year, you've got the potential of maybe Alabama getting in or Alabama not getting in, and they were overlooked. Why? Because, the committee was, whether they like it or not, they're human beings. They were in a position where even with 4 teams, they could make a subjective opinion that looked like it was based on maybe what happened the year before. History and tradition is a great part of the college game, but it shouldn't have a damn thing to do with what happened in the here and now of college football. And as I've said many times, David, on your show and others, we need to remove the veil of impropriety. Yep. And in my view, going to a set number of automatic qualifying bids, it does do that. Okay, you may not like the fact, if you're a fan of Big 12 schools in the ACC, that they are automatically guaranteed 2 more. But here are the business facts. The business facts are those leagues signed a contract that enabled those 2 leagues to take more control of it. Those are decisions that have already been made, okay? And on top of that, the metrics and the numbers alone favor those two conferences. And push comes to shove, if you're either Jim Phillips or Brett Yormark, are you in a better situation with that format being what it is and you're guaranteed to than you were before when you weren't guaranteed anything? I'd say probably that's true.
Well, you're guaranteed 2, where before it was 1. But at 5 and 11, and that's what's interesting about Yormark and the Big 12 saying, hey, bring it. Make us earn it too, when it does seem like you're almost running into a big boiling pot of water that you may not get more than 1. And look, we saw what happened to BYU last year.
The at-large opportunities are still there.
Yeah, they got to prove.
And by the way, that was another thing. That was another thing that I thought was interesting is that Joel, to his credit, and he did not just play the company line. I mean, he said, well, what about this? Because it's been brought up. What if it's not 2 and 2? What if it's 2.5 and 2.5? Okay. And that would mean that the potential for either one of those leagues to get 3 is very good. In a given year, if it's 2.5 and 2.5. And Petitti had no problem saying, that's something we can discuss. It's not something that's been put on the table as yet, but we're welcome to hear, all the ideas and concepts. But that's the point. We need to hear the sharing of ideas needs to take place.
I wish they would televise the meeting. I told Mac Rhodes that. Why don't you guys make it more transparent? I know they won't, but maybe we would see actually who might be the weasel or who might be the hammer,
Well, that's the problem. Nobody wants to be the actual weasel. But again, I go back to this, David, because of the years I've spent in this business. And like it or not, fans need to understand this. Television is what's financing all of this. Okay, you don't get $20.5 million per school to take care of rev share unless television is subsidizing it. Okay, so what is he trying to do? Basically, with the deal with the SEC to get some interconference games, he's getting more really quality crossover games on both partnerships, whether it's ESPN on the SEC side or Fox on the Big 10, Big 12 side, okay? And Big 12 also is part of ESPN. We all know that. In fact, they have the greater package of games than we do. So it's just creating more revenue streams. The play-in games just for his league to get to those 4 teams that he's talking about. What does that do? It creates more games of greater interest and what? Additional games that bring new revenue streams. And that's why I think there's this discourse about the SEC needing to go to 9 games. Greg Snakey painted himself in a corner by being so public a few years ago, talking about the schedule that he had made with 9 conference games. And if you recall, that's when I said what I did that put me at odds with both he and Feinbaum. Paul, who was doing a similar interview with Greg that Joel just did with Petitti, and Paul would not bring it up. He wouldn't go there, and I understand the pickle that he was in, but I took off on both of them, so much so to the point that Paul and I have remained friends, but he's not had me on his show anymore, and I guarantee I know why, because Greg Sankey doesn't want me on their airwaves ever. And that's fine. He runs the show. He's the conference commissioner. That's fine. I get it. But the bottom line is when you make it public that this is what you're doing. I wasn't the only member of the media that was, wait a minute, we thought we were going to 9. And in the end, what was happening? The presidents of the schools that weren't top tier, teams in college football in the SEC, but the presidents of those schools that are just trying to get bowl eligible, the bottom feeders that want to get just to 6-win plateaus, those were those that would not vote in favor of the 9 games. So I see the approach that Greg has as being still good, and I'm glad that he's accessible. But you can certainly get into more trouble when you make these kinds of statements and throw that kind of information out there for media consumption, and then you don't follow up on it. Okay, as opposed to kind of being behind the curtains, not saying much, if anything, until such time as you've got some consensus and you're ready to announce something that's big. And I'm telling you, that's the way Petitti approaches it in the Big Ten office.
So I've reached out. Joel Klatt to me is gold. He's I can when we have him on, and it's been a while. You know that I actually reached out to Ann Payne, and then Jack just emailed me back, and hopefully we can work something out at Big 12 Media Days in Frisco. I don't know, but he was. Well,
you saw what I wrote about him today.
Oh, I did. Yeah,
I complimented him.
Yeah,
I
okay.
did.
But
he cares about the game, and not just about the game on Fox. He cares about the totality of the game. He does.
So has any network you've worked for before, like you mentioned, Feinbaum, ESPN, SEC, has any network ever sent you talking points like it's a political rally of what you have to say or not? Because I don't know if you would. No. I think you'd probably tear that up and shred it.
No, I've had my phone ring after the fact. Yes, but no one's ever told me, what talking points I need to take in. That hasn't happened with me. That isn't to say that it hasn't happened for others. It may have. There are some networks that will not let you do an interview unless you've cleared it through their public relations people. That happened. And that happens a lot, especially when there's a hot button topic centered around what's going on with your network, and it's maybe acquired the rights and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And you have to be, I take my marching orders when it comes to that. But in terms of asking questions about issues that are related to the game of college football and the game's future, which is really what this is, no, that's never happened with me. I thought Joel walked a really good tightrope with the way he conducted that interview. I got a lot of information out of Petitti that I otherwise might not have had. And while I have Commissioner Petitti in my phone, I haven't reached out to him because I know he's got bigger fish to fry than to hear from me. I just know enough about him to understand how he's approaching this. And I think those that have taken shots at him because he's not, saying he's in the witness protection program, that kind of thing, I don't believe that. I just think they don't understand how he governs. There is a difference in the manner in which he leads. Tony Petitti's like one of those guys, and you knew one, David, I'm sure, either in school or somewhere that you've run across in business. Sometimes the guy that's the smartest guy in the room doesn't need you to know that.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the kind of guy Tony Petitti is, and he's been that way his entire professional life. And he's more than happy, I think, to see his colleague Greg Snakey take more of a lead role with the media, having more interviews and discussions with people that are in the media business. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that he's not involved. In fact, many times it's the guy that's not as verbal that is directing the course of action.
Okay.
And I think that's a pretty good marriage. I think the two of them have. I'm a proponent of the two working together. I really am.
All right. Last thing, and I maybe I got about 4 or 5 minutes. You have to go, and I have things too. If they do this scheduling alliance, which means the possibility of Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, whoever else against Alabama, Texas, and some of those guys are playing like Texas, Ohio State to start the year. That sounds great, but actually doesn't that block out the ACC and the Big 12 from having bigger games? They're the ones that need to play those teams. Even if they get their asses kicked, they need to play those teams. So could that block them out? And I'm not against a 3-loss team from either conference who plays a murderous schedule getting in the playoff against a team that might be 10-2. I'm not against that. But will that block out the ACC and Big 12 from having the opportunities, even if they get bloodied, because college football conference powers sometimes can become cyclical. The Big Eight used to be amazing. The Pac-12 was amazing.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't mean it won't stay this way because of where football is, NIL, et cetera, the Power TV, et cetera.
No.
But you get what I'm
Right.
saying?
No, I do get what you're saying, but I think we're not talking about so many games potentially that could be played in this sort of intersectional Big Ten SEC alliance that's been thrown out there for us to consume. There's not going to be enough games to keep the Big 12 or the ACC from having those kinds of games, David. I mean, it's not. It's a good business deal, for the coffers of both rights holders to both the Big Ten and the SEC. That's why they're talking about doing it. Just like these play-in games that sort of that's a little bit like what we're seeing now with these different leagues popping up across the pond with football, and it's become so popular, playing in to be one of the 4 teams in the college football playoff, meaning that at the end of the year, you're giving fans more reason to want to watch games that really mattered. We already saw that last year at the end of the Big 12 season. How many games did Iowa State play well into the evening and well into the end of the season that really mattered in terms of whether they would get in the college football playoff or not? And I think we saw a lot. We really did. And those games involving teams that are ranked somewhere in the 15 to 20 area, playing games of great relevance in late October and November, enhanced the ratings for the regular season tremendously. And we're not talking about teams necessarily that have great followings on television. But the whole SEC Big Ten situation that we have seen created is only going to enhance the need for those schools in the Big 12 and the ACC to continue to do the same. So that if you're playing 4 non-conference games, all right, you should at least be playing not just one game against a Power 4 school. You need to be playing 2 at minimum and 3, hopefully. Okay, if you've got your act together, you should be willing to do that, which gives us better games overall. And that's not going to rule out everybody else either. There's still room. And the other thing, too, when you were talking about the Pac-12 and you were talking about the Big 8, what have we seen? Because of the conference realignment, we're basically still seeing Pac-12 teams in the Big 10, and we're seeing Pac-12 teams in the Big 12. So the regionality factor that you're talking about, whether it's dated or not, we're still going to get that, even though they're comprised of 2 leagues rather than 4.
Tim, I know your schedule, like I said, it's juggling a lot of things from being a granddad to a broadcaster to thank you for your time, my friend. We can't wait to get you going into the summer, into the season. Tim Brando with us, 365 Sports.